In the glittering ballrooms of 1815 London, where beauty determined a woman's worth, Isabella Blackwood stood apart, not for her grace or her charm, but for what society deemed her greatest flaw, a face that broke every rule of conventional beauty. While other debutantes danced and laughed, she remained in the shadows, her brilliant mind and gentle heart hidden behind whispers and turned backs. But fate had other plans, for in those same gilded halls walked Lord Alexander Rothschild, a nobleman whose own scars ran deeper than skin. He saw what others couldn't or wouldn't see, a beauty that transcended the physical. What happens when one chance encounter threatens to upend an entire society's definition of beauty? Before we continue this tale of extraordinary love, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story speaks to your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's chapter will change everything. The candlelight in Isabella's chamber flickered across the pages of her journal as she made her final entry before departing for the Pembrokes' ball. Her quill scratched softly against the cream-colored paper, leaving behind words that would never reach another's eyes. My dearest journal, tonight marks my official entry into London society. Father insists I'll shine like a star, but I fear I shall be more akin to a shadow, present yet unseen, or worse, seen only to be scorned. Isabella's fingers trembled slightly as she traced the pressed forget-me-nots adorning the journal's margins. Their delicate blue petals, carefully preserved between the pages, reminded her of happier days in the countryside, where flowers didn't judge and butterflies danced with the plain as readily as the pretty. Miss Isabella, her lady's maid Mary, appeared at the doorway. Your father asks if you're ready. Isabella closed the journal with careful reverence, tucking it into her desk drawer beneath a stack of scientific treatises and botanical sketches. As ready as I'll ever be, Mary. The mirror before her reflected what society had deemed her curse, a face that defied every convention of beauty. Her nose was too prominent, her chin too sharp, her complexion marked by childhood illness. Yet her eyes, deep brown with flecks of gold, held a fierce intelligence that few bothered to notice. William Blackwood's heavy footsteps preceded his arrival. "My darling girl," he said, his voice warm with affection. Though society whispered about the merchant who'd risen above his station, none could deny his success or his devotion to his only child. "Father," Isabella stood, smoothing her new silk gown, a shade of deep blue that Mary had assured her brought out the warmth in her complexion. "You needn't escort me tonight. I know you have business correspondence to attend to." Nonsense. He adjusted his cravat, grey hair neatly tied back in the current fashion. What business could be more important than seeing my daughter make her debut? A memory surfaced unbidden. Isabella at 12. Returning home in tears after the local. Children had dubbed her Griffin Face, claiming she looked like one of the mythical beasts in their storybooks. Her father had gathered her close that day, whispering, "They mock what they don't understand, my dear. True beauty resides in the heart and mind." The Pembroke townhouse blazed with light. Carriages lined up along the curved drive like beads. On a string. Isabella's hand tightened on her father's arm as they ascended the marble steps. Inside, the ballroom swirled with colour and movement, a kaleidoscope of society's finest in their silks and jewels. "Miss Blackwood," Lady Pembroke's greeting held the barest minimum of courtesy. "How good of you to come." Her eyes swept past. Isabella as if she were furniture, already focusing on the next arrival. The evening unfolded exactly as Isabella had feared. Young ladies huddled in groups, hiding whispers behind painted fans. Gentlemen who approached her father to discuss business pointedly avoided requesting a dance from his daughter. She found refuge near a marble column, observing the swirling. Dancers with a scientist's detachment. "Griffin Face is in fine form tonight," came a cutting whisper, followed by poorly concealed laughter. Isabella recognized the voice, Lady Victoria Ashworth, whose perfect features masked a heart of ice. I hear she reads books, scientific ones if you can imagine, as if a face like that needed any help repelling suitors. More laughter. Isabella's fingers curled into her palms, nails biting flesh. She would not cry. She would not give them that. Satisfaction. A commotion at the entrance drew attention away from her momentarily. New arrivals were being announced, and a ripple of excitement passed through the crowd. Isabella caught fragments of conversation. Lord Rothschild returned from the war. Such a tragedy about his face. She didn't raise her eyes to look. Let another person's misfortune serve as tonight's entertainment. She had endured enough of society's cruelty to wish it on anyone else. Instead, she pulled a small notebook from her reticule, her constant companion, filled with observations of plants and people alike. In it, she began to sketch the pattern of movement across the ballroom floor, the way dancers wove through space like stars in their orbits. Perhaps there was mathematical beauty to be found here, even if she couldn't participate in it. Miss Blackwood? Her father appeared at her side, concern etching his features. Perhaps we should take our leave early tonight. Isabella squared her shoulders. No, father. We'll stay exactly as long as is proper. I won't give them the satisfaction of driving me away. He smiled then, pride warming his eyes. That's my girl, strong as your mother ever was. The music swelled, another dance beginning, and through it all, Isabella stood tall, her notebook open before her, recording a world that had no place for her yet, but would, she silently vowed, someday be forced to acknowledge her worth. In her mind, she was already composing tonight's journal entry. Dear Diary, I may not be beautiful, but I am here, and that, perhaps, is its own kind of victory. Lord Alexander Rothschild stood before the gilt-edged mirror in his London townhouse, fingers tracing the scar that ran from his left temple to jaw. The military commission document lay open on his desk, its official seal gleaming in the morning. Light, honourable discharge due to injuries sustained in service to the Crown. Stop fussing with it, Alexander. His sister Charlotte's voice carried a gentle reprimand as she entered his study. The scar makes you look distinguished. Distinguished. He turned from the mirror with a wry smile. Is that what they're calling it in the drawing rooms these days? Charlotte adjusted his cravat with practiced hands. You've been hiding in this townhouse for 2 weeks. It's time to rejoin society. Society. The word tasted bitter on his tongue. The same society that speaks of honor while counting coins behind fans, that measures worth by inheritance and beauty while knowing nothing of either. The very same. Charlotte stepped back, surveying her handiwork. And you'll face it with the same courage you showed on the battlefield. The invitation to Lady Pembroke's musical evening lay unopened on his desk, next to the commission that had changed his life. Before the war, he had been the golden son, the heir who could do no wrong. Now, Lady Victoria has been asking about you, Charlotte mentioned too casually. Has she? Alexander's tone was dry. Curious, since she couldn't flee fast enough when I called upon her after returning from the peninsula. She was shocked, Alexander. We all were. You can't blame. I don't blame anyone for being shocked, he cut in. I blame them for being shallow. The grandfather clock chimed 7, its deep tones echoing through the house. Alexander squared his shoulders, a soldier's instinct never quite forgotten. Very well, then. Let's give them something to whisper about. Lady Pembroke's drawing room was a symphony in cream and gold, designed to showcase the beauty of the young ladies arranged artfully about the room. Alexander's entrance caused the expected stir, titled Wealthy and Scarred, made for an intriguing combination. Lord Rothschild. Lady Pembroke's welcome held genuine warmth. His title, it seemed, outweighed his disfigurement. We're honoured. You could join us. He made his bow, aware of the eyes following his movement. The scar pulled slightly when he smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The honour is mine, my lady. Charlotte had already been swept away by her circle of friends, leaving him to navigate the social waters alone. He found a quiet corner from which to observe the proceedings. a habit learned in war that served equally well in peace. It was from this vantage point that he first saw her. She sat apart from the others, bent over what appeared to be a small notebook. While other ladies posed and preened, she seemed absorbed in her task, occasionally glancing up to study the room before returning to her writing. "That's the Blackwood girl," came a whisper not meant for his ears. "A merchant's daughter. Quite unfortunate-looking, poor thing." Alexander watched as she lifted her head, and for a moment her eyes met his. There was no coquetry there, no artificial modesty. Instead, he saw intelligence, pride, and a flash of defiance that stirred something in his war-weary soul. She looked away first, but not in shame. Rather, she returned to her notebook with the air of someone who had more important matters to attend to than society's stares. "Alexander, darling," Lady Victoria's voice sliced through his contemplation. She stood before him, a vision in pale pink silk, her perfect features arranged in practiced concern. "We've all been so worried. Such a terrible accident." "Not an accident, Victoria." His voice was quiet but carried an edge. A French cavalry sabre tends to be quite deliberate. She faltered, her carefully constructed mask slipping for just a moment. "Of course, how brave of you. We must catch up properly. I'm holding a small dinner party next week." But Alexander's attention had drifted back to the young woman with the notebook. She was speaking now to an older gentleman, her father by their similar features, and for the first time that evening her face transformed with a genuine smile. "Beautiful," he murmured. "What was that, darling?" Victoria touched his arm. "Nothing of consequence." He gently removed her hand. "If you'll excuse me, I believe my sister is signaling for my attention." As he moved through the room, he caught another glimpse of the Blackwood girl's profile. Society called her unfortunate-looking. Perhaps society needed to learn to look deeper. In his pocket, he felt the weight of his own notebook, a military habit of recording observations that he'd never quite abandoned. Tonight he thought might be worth documenting after all. The Hartleys' conservatory offered blessed refuge from the suffocating ballroom. Isabella inhaled deeply, savoring the rich scent of blooming orchids. Here, among the carefully tended exotic plants, she could pretend she was somewhere else entirely. Perhaps a scientific expedition to distant lands. She extracted her drawing materials from her reticule, settling onto a wrought-iron bench partially hidden by a massive palm. The night-blooming cereus was about to flower, its pristine white petals just beginning to unfurl. Isabella's pencil moved swiftly across the paper, capturing the delicate structure with practiced precision. "Your technique is remarkably accurate." The deep voice startled her. Isabella looked up to find Lord Rothschild standing a respectful distance away, his scarred profile half hidden in shadow. "My lord." She moved to stand, but he gestured for her to remain seated. "Please, don't let me interrupt your work." He stepped closer into the lamplight. "Though I confess I'm curious about your subject." Isabella hesitated only briefly before turning her sketch toward him. "Epiphyllum oxypetalum, the queen of the night. It blooms for a single evening before wilting at dawn. Beauty that exists only in darkness?" His mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "How poetic." "Not poetic, my lord, scientific." Isabella surprised herself with her boldness, though I suppose there's a certain poetry in taxonomy as well. He moved closer still, studying the drawing. "You've captured the structure of the stamens." "Perfectly. Are you familiar with Linnaeus's work?" Isabella's heart quickened. "You know of Linnaeus?" "I spent some time in Sweden before the war." He gestured to the empty portion of the bench. "May I?" She nodded, shifting slightly to make room. The moment felt surreal, a nobleman discussing botanical classification with a merchant's daughter. "In a shadowy conservatory. Your drawing reminds me of the botanical illustrations I saw at Uppsala University," he continued, "though perhaps with more spirit." "Spirit, my lord?" "Yes." He traced the air above her sketch, following the lines. "Without touching the paper. Technical accuracy, certainly, but there's life in these lines. You see beauty in the structure itself, not merely the flower's decorative qualities. Isabella studied his profile, discovering that his scar did nothing to diminish the intelligence in his eyes. Most people consider my scientific interests peculiar. Most people consider anything beyond their immediate understanding peculiar. His tone held a hint of bitterness. Tell me, Miss Blackwood, have you studied the botanical gardens at Kew? No, I haven't had the opportunity. A shame. Their collection of exotic specimens is unparalleled. My sister and I plan to visit. Next week, perhaps. There you are, Lord Rothschild. Lady Victoria's voice shattered the quiet intimacy of the moment. She swept into the conservatory, a vision in emerald silk, then stopped short at the sight of Isabella. Oh, I didn't realize you were occupied. Isabella began gathering her materials, but Lord Rothschild's hand stayed her movement. Miss Blackwood was just educating me about Epiphyllum oxypetalum. Fascinating creature. Wouldn't you agree, Lady Victoria? Victoria's perfect nose wrinkled slightly. I'm sure I wouldn't know about such things. But the next dance is beginning, and you did promise, did I? He stood slowly, then turned to Isabella with a formal bow. Miss Blackwood, thank you for the botanical discourse. Perhaps we might continue our discussion of Linnaeus another. In time, Isabella managed a small nod, her heart still racing from the unexpected encounter. As Lord Rothschild allowed himself to be led away, she noticed he had left something on the bench, a small volume of Swedish botanical terms. Later that night, in the privacy of her chamber, Isabella would add the book to her collection and complete her illustration of the night blooming Sirius. In the margins, she carefully noted the date and time, along with an observation that had nothing to do with botany. Today, someone finally saw me. The anonymous note arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered alongside invitations to 3 different social events. Isabella's hands trembled slightly as she read the carefully penned words. My dear Miss Blackwood, do not mistake momentary attention for genuine regard. Some gentlemen, when marred themselves, must settle for what they can get. Better to know your place than to reach above your station and face inevitable heartbreak. A friend. More invitations, miss? Mary asked, arranging Isabella's hair for the morning. Yes. Isabella tucked the cruel note into her pocket, away from Mary's concerned gaze. It seems we're quite popular this week. The truth was harder to ignore. Her brief conversation with Lord Rothschild had not gone unnoticed. Gossip travelled through London society like wildfire, and someone, Isabella had little doubt who, was determined to extinguish any spark before it could flame. Lord Rothschild's sister has invited us to tea, she told her father over breakfast, along with several other young ladies. William Blackwood looked up from his newspaper, eyes sharp with concern. Lady Charlotte? That's unexpected. The note arrived just after 1 from Lady Victoria Ashworth. Isabella spread jam on her toast with deliberate care. And another from Lady Pembroke. Sudden popularity can be a double-edged sword, my dear. Her father set aside his paper. Perhaps we should discuss. A commotion at the door interrupted him. Their butler entered, bearing a package wrapped in brown paper. From Lord Rothschild, miss. He presented it with a slight bow. Isabella unwrapped it carefully, aware of her father's watchful gaze. Inside lay a beautifully bound volume of Botanical. Illustrations, with a note tucked between its pages. Miss Blackwood, since Kew Gardens must wait, I thought you might appreciate these illustrations from their collection. My sister particularly wished me to extend her invitation to tea tomorrow. She claims my conversation about Linnaean classification has quite intrigued her, though I suspect she merely wishes to meet the woman who could discuss botany in a ballroom. Yours sincerely, A. Rothschild. Well, her father's voice held equal. Measures of curiosity and concern. It's a book of botanical illustrations. Isabella passed him the volume, but kept the note. From the Kew collection? Appropriate enough. He examined the book with a merchant's eye. though perhaps not entirely proper without a previously established acquaintance. We met at the Hartley's ball. Isabella sipped her tea. He showed interest in my botanical drawings. Did he indeed? Her father's tone was carefully neutral. And what of his interest in you, my dear? Before Isabella could respond, another caller was announced. Lady Victoria Ashworth swept into their breakfast room as if she owned it, her morning dress a masterpiece of expensive simplicity. My dear Miss Blackwood. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I simply had to call. Everyone is talking about your botanical discussions with Lord Rothschild. How kind of you to take an interest. Isabella's voice remained steady. Oh, I always take an interest in Alexander's charitable endeavours. Victoria settled uninvited into a chair. He has such a tender heart, you see, always championing the less fortunate. William Blackwood's teacup clattered sharply against its saucer. I'm sure my daughter needs no championing, Lady Victoria. Of course not. Victoria's laugh tinkled like broken glass. I simply wouldn't want there to be any misunderstandings. Society can be so cruel to those who don't know their proper place. The anonymous note seemed to burn in Isabella's pocket. She met Victoria's gaze steadily. Thank you for your concern. I'm quite aware of society's cruelty. Are you? Victoria stood, smoothing her skirts. Then you'll understand why I felt compelled to warn you. As a friend, after she departed, William Blackwood turned to his daughter. Isabella, I know, father. She touched the book of illustrations, its pages filled with beautiful things that bloomed regardless of who was watching. But perhaps just this once, society's cruelty needn't have the final word. The London Library stood as a fortress of knowledge, its towering shelves offering sanctuary from the world outside. Isabella traced her fingers along leather-bound spines, breathing in the familiar scent of paper and ink. Here, among the books, appearances meant nothing. Only the content of one's mind mattered. I thought I might find you here. She turned to find Lord Rothschild emerging from between the stacks, a leather-bound volume of poetry in his hands, in the diffused light filtering. Through high windows, his scar seemed less harsh, more like a story waiting to be told. My lord, Isabella curtsied, careful to maintain proper distance despite the privacy of their location. I trust you're well? Better now. He held up the book. I've been reading Wordsworth. In nature and the language of the sense, the anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart and soul, of all my moral being. You quote poetry as easily as botanical terms, Isabella observed. Don't all soldiers carry poetry into battle? His smile held a touch of irony. Though I confess, Linnaeus proved more practical in the field hospitals. Isabella's curiosity overcame her reserve. Is that where you learned about medicinal plants? Indeed. He moved closer, sheltering them both in the shadow of a towering bookcase. The local healers in Spain taught me more than any London physician, but you haven't said what you think of Wordsworth. I prefer Blake. Isabella retrieved a slim volume from her basket. To see a world in a grain of sand, and heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand, Alexander continued, and eternity in an hour. They finished together. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with the dust motes dancing in the library's hushed atmosphere. Alexander broke it first, his voice low and intent. Miss Blackwood, Isabella, if I may, I must tell you that your conversation has been a revelation. In a world of manufactured pleasantries, you speak of infinite things. My lord, Alexander, please. At least here, among the books. Alexander. His name felt dangerous on her tongue. You know what they say about me? I know what they say about us both. He touched his scar unconsciously. The beast and the blue stocking. Rather poetic, don't you think? Some would call it tragic. Some would call anything that challenges their narrow view of beauty tragic. He placed the Wordsworth beside her Blake. I've seen true tragedy, Isabella. It looks nothing like your face. The sound of approaching footsteps sent them stepping apart. A moment later, Lady Victoria appeared, her expression shifting from surprise to calculated pleasure. What a charming tableau! Her voice carried to the furthest corners of the library. "Lord Rothschild, I didn't expect to find you here, Lady Victoria." Alexander's tone cooled perceptibly. "Miss Blackwood and I were discussing poetry." Poetry. Victoria's laugh drew the attention of nearby readers. "How intellectual, though perhaps more suitable pursuits could be found for a man of your station." Isabella gathered her books, preparing to retreat, but Alexander's hand on her arm stayed her. "I find intellectual pursuits entirely suitable for any station, my lady." His voice was quiet, but carried an edge of steel. "In fact, Miss Blackwood has been enlightening me about Blake's views on perception and reality. Fascinating stuff, though perhaps a bit complex for general conversation." Victoria's perfect features tightened almost imperceptibly. "Really, Alexander, you needn't pretend." "Pretend?" He picked up Isabella's copy of Blake, handling it with obvious reverence. "To appreciate intelligence? To enjoy conversation that goes deeper than the latest ondits? I assure you I'm pretending nothing." The silence that followed felt like a declaration of war. Victoria's gaze darted between them, calculating, before her social mask slipped back into place. "How wonderful! For you both." She turned to go, then paused. "Oh, Isabella, dear, I nearly forgot. You'll be attending Lady Morton's garden party tomorrow, won't you? Do come. Everyone is simply dying to discuss your newfound literary interests." After she departed, Isabella released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. That was either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both. Alexander's smile held a touch of grimness. "The question is, are you prepared for what comes next?" Isabella looked at their books, still lying together on the library table. Blake beside Wordsworth, poetry beside science, two souls finding common ground in uncommon places. "I've spent my life being judged for my face," she said quietly. "I suppose being judged for my mind makes a pleasant change." His laugh, warm and genuine, echoed through the library's hallowed halls. "Miss Blackwood, I do believe you're going to take London society by storm." "Not alone," she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "No," he agreed, his eyes holding hers. "Not alone at all." Lady Morton's garden party dawned bright and merciless. Isabella studied her dance card, empty save for a single name written in familiar bold strokes. "Lord Alexander Rothschild, First Waltz." "You don't have to do this," Charlotte said softly, appearing at Isabella's side. Alexander's sister had proved an unexpected ally, her genuine warmth a stark contrast to society's cold shoulders. Alexander can be impulsive when he's fighting for something he believes in. "And what does he believe in, Lady Charlotte?" "You." Charlotte's direct gaze held no artifice. "He believes in you." Before Isabella could respond, a ripple of whispers spread through the gathering. Lord Rothschild had arrived, and on his arm, to the evident horror of the ton, was his grandmother, the formidable Dowager Countess of Rothschild. "Alexander," the Dowager announced, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "you simply must introduce me to the young lady who's finally sparked your interest in botany. I was beginning to think those books in our conservatory would moulder away untouched." Alexander's eyes found Isabella's across the garden. "Grandmother, may I present Miss Isabella Blackwood?" Isabella curtsied deeply before the Dowager, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. "A pleasure, my lady." "Humph." The Dowager adjusted her lorgnette. "So you're the one who set the cats among the pigeons. Good. The society needs a proper shaking up." She turned to her grandson. "Well, aren't you going to ask her to dance?" The orchestra struck up a waltz. Alexander extended his hand, and Isabella found herself swept into the dance before she could properly process what was happening. Around them, other couples drew back slightly, as if ugliness and scars might be contagious. "Your grandmother is unexpected," Isabella managed. As they turned about the garden, "She's been waiting years to scandalize society again." His hand was warm at her waist. "You've given her the perfect opportunity." "Is that all I am? An opportunity for scandal?" Alexander's steps faltered slightly. "You know you're far more than that." "Do I?" The words escaped before she could stop them. "Sometimes I wonder if you're simply proving a point to society, that beauty isn't everything." "Isabella." He drew her slightly closer than strict propriety allowed. "Do you think I would risk my family's reputation simply to make a point?" Before she could answer, Lady Victoria's voice cut through the music. "Really, Alexander, this has gone on long enough. You've made your statement about looking beneath the surface. Very noble, very you. But surely it's time to stop this charade." They had drawn to a stop, the other dancers creating a circle around them. Alexander's grandmother watched with keen interest, while Charlotte moved to stand supportively near Isabella. "The only charade, Lady Victoria," Alexander said quietly, "is the one where we pretend your beauty makes you kind." A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. Victoria's face flushed an unbecoming red. "How dare you? After everything we meant to each other." "We meant nothing to each other." Alexander's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "You made that perfectly clear when this," he gestured to his scar, "changed your plans for our advantageous marriage." "That's unfair." Victoria's mask cracked completely. "You were ruined, I was wounded, my lady. There's a difference." He turned to Isabella, his eyes softening. "Some scars show us exactly who people are." Isabella felt the weight of every stare, heard the whispers building like a wave. But for the first time, she stood straight under society's judgment. "Indeed they do, my lord." The Dowager Countess's cane rapped sharply against the garden path. "Well said, both of you. Now, Lady Victoria, I believe you were just leaving." "No. Then perhaps you'd care to explain to me why you've been spreading rumors about my grandson and Miss Blackwood." Victoria blanched. "No one crossed the Dowager Countess." "Of Rothschild? I merely thought—" "No, my dear," the Dowager cut in. "You didn't think. That's rather the problem, isn't it?" The garden party dissolved into chaos after that. Isabella found herself swept into the Rothschild carriage alongside Charlotte and the Dowager, while Alexander followed on horseback. Her dance card remained, empty save for that single waltz, but somehow it felt fuller than any she'd ever held before. In the aftermath of Lady Morton's party, invitations arrived at the Blackwood residence with surprising frequency. Some bore the Rothschild crest. Others came from families eager to align themselves with the Dowager Countess's apparent favorite. A painted fan arrived from Alexander, its delicate surface adorned with tiny forget-me-nots and hidden messages written in the language of flowers. "Quite the clever gift," William Blackwood observed, watching his daughter decode the botanical symbols. "Though perhaps a bit forward," Isabella traced the painted blooms. "He's asking permission to call properly, father, through flowers rather than words." "Ah." Her father settled into his favorite chair. "And what do you think of that?" Before she could answer, Mary hurried in. "Miss, you must come quickly. Lady Victoria is here." They found Victoria pacing the morning room, her usual poise fractured. She spun to face Isabella, cheeks flushed with emotion. "You've ruined everything," she spat. "Years of careful planning, destroyed because you caught his eye with your scientific pretensions." Isabella held her ground. "I pretend nothing, Lady Victoria, unlike some." "You think you've won?" Victoria laughed bitterly. "You think society will accept you just because the Dowager finds you amusing? They're laughing behind their fans, plotting your downfall. And Alexander, he's proving a point, nothing more. My daughter," William Blackwood's voice cut through the tension, "needs prove nothing to anyone. Now, I suggest you take your leave, my lady, before you say something truly unforgivable." Victoria drew herself up, mask sliding back into place. I came to warn you. His family will never truly accept a merchant's daughter. Better to end this now before what? Alexander stood in the doorway, Charlotte at his side. Before I make my own choice rather than following society's script. Victoria whirled to face him. Alexander, I didn't realize clearly. He moved to stand beside Isabella. Though I wonder, were you this concerned for my family's reputation when you broke our engagement after my injury? The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's face drained of color. That was different, she whispered. We were young, and your face... Yes, Alexander said quietly. My face. Rather ironic that you now stand here warning Isabella about society's judgment, isn't it? Charlotte stepped forward. Her gentle demeanor hardened into something fierce. I think you should leave, Lady Victoria, unless you'd like me to share. With the tongue exactly why my brother's engagement ended. After Victoria's departure, Isabella found herself trembling slightly. Alexander's hand found hers warm and steady. I should have told you about the engagement, he said. Yes, Isabella agreed. You should have. It was years ago. Before the war, before... He gestured to his scar. I thought I loved her. But when I returned, she couldn't bear to look at me. That's when I learned the difference between love and ornament. Charlotte touched her brother's shoulder. And now? Alexander's eyes met Isabella's. Now I understand that true beauty lies in the courage to face society's judgment without flinching, in the mind that sees wonder in a flower's structure, in the heart that values scars for the stories they tell. William Blackwood cleared his throat. Pretty words, my lord. But my daughter's happiness means more to me than poetry. As it should. Sir, Alexander turned to face him, which is why I'm here to formally request permission to court her. Not for her face or mine, but for the remarkable woman she is. Isabella's father studied them both for a long moment. And if society never accepts her, then society is poorer for its blindness. Alexander's voice held absolute conviction. But I suspect your daughter cares more for acceptance from those who see her true worth than from those who judge by appearances alone. Isabella squeezed Alexander's hand. We're quite the pair, aren't we? The scarred nobleman and the plain merchants. Daughter? Plain? Charlotte scoffed. My dear, any woman who can stand up to Victoria Ashworth, charm the dowager countess, and make my brother quote poetry is anything but plain. William Blackwood's stern expression finally softened. You have my permission to call, Lord Rothschild. Though I suspect trying to stop you would be rather like trying to hold back the tide. The Rothschild townhouse library had become their sanctuary. Isabella sat at a massive oak desk, a leather-bound scientific journal open before her, while Alexander pored over military dispatches nearby. The comfortable silence between them spoke volumes about how their relationship had evolved over the past weeks. I never thought to find this here, Isabella murmured, turning a page carefully. A complete treatise on medicinal herbs, written by a woman no less. Alexander looked up from his papers. Ah, you found my mother's journal. She was quite the herbalist before she passed. Isabella traced the elegant script. These combinations of herbs, they're revolutionary. The application for battlefield medicine alone is exactly what drew me to her work during the war. Alexander moved to stand behind her chair. Those remedies saved more than a few lives in Spain. But why hasn't this been published? These discoveries could help so many. Alexander's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. Society wasn't ready to accept medical advice from a woman, even one with a title. Isabella turned to face him. And now? Now? His smile held a hint of mischief. Now I know someone with both. The knowledge and courage to continue her work. He reached past her to open a drawer, withdrawing a small packet of papers. These are her final notes, including observations from local healers in Spain. I've been waiting for the right person to share them with. Isabella's hands trembled as she opened the packet. Alexander, This is... I couldn't possibly... You already have. He pulled another chair close. Your own journal, don't look surprised, Charlotte told me about it, contains remarkably similar conclusions about several healing compounds. You've been discussing my work with your sister? She's rather impressed by your research, as am I. His expression grew serious. Isabella, my mother never got to publish her findings because society wasn't ready, but times are changing. The war showed us that old ways of thinking must be challenged. A knock at the door interrupted them. Charlotte entered, her face unusually grave. Alexander, grandmother wishes to see you, both of you. The Dowager Countess sat regally in her private sitting room, a stack of letters before her. Well, she said without preamble, it seems Lady Victoria has been busy. What has she done? Charlotte perched on a nearby chair, written to every influential family in London, expressing her concerns about this courtship. The Dowager's voice dripped with sarcasm. Apparently, she fears for the reputation of our family. Alexander's hand found Isabella's. And what do you think, grandmother? I think, the Dowager said slowly, that I haven't seen you this alive since before the war. I also think Miss Blackwood's research could revolutionize battlefield medicine. She smiled at their startled expressions. Oh yes, I've read your journal, my dear. Found it quite fascinating. Isabella's mind raced. You've read? Charlotte brought it to my attention. The parallels with my late daughter-in-law's work are remarkable. The Dowager lifted a letter, which is why I've written to the Royal Society. Alexander straightened. Grandmother, the war changed everything, she continued. Society can no longer afford to ignore brilliant minds simply because they come in unexpected packages. She fixed Isabella with a penetrating stare. Are you prepared for what publishing would mean? The scrutiny, the criticism? Isabella thought of Alexander's mother's hidden journal, of all the minds silenced by society's expectations. I've faced society's judgment my entire life, my lady. At least this time, it would be for something that matters. The Dowager's face softened. Just so. She turned to Alexander. And you, grandson? I believe in her, he said simply. In her mind, her courage, her heart. As do I. The Dowager gathered her letters, which is why I've also written to every family who received Victoria's poison pen. They can either support the future Lady Rothschild's groundbreaking medical research, or they can explain to their wounded sons why they opposed it. Isabella's breath caught. Lady Rothschild, Alexander squeezed her hand. If you'll have me, the Dowager Countess made a sound suspiciously like a snort. Oh, for heaven's sake, save the proposal for a more private moment. We have work to do. She fixed them both with a stern look. Society won't change itself, you know. The formal challenge arrived at dawn, carried by Lady Victoria's younger brother, whose face bore the uncomfortable expression of one caught between duty and distaste. Lord Rothschild, your recent conduct regarding Miss Blackwood has called into question not only your own honour, but that of Lady Victoria Ashworth. As her brother and protector, I demand satisfaction. Hyde Park, tomorrow at first light. Lord James Ashworth Alexander read the note twice, his expression unreadable. Did Victoria put you up to this, James? The younger man shifted uncomfortably. She claims you've slandered her character, spread lies about your broken engagement. The only lies, Alexander said quietly, were the ones she told about why she ended it. He placed the challenge letter on his desk. You were too young to remember, but your sister and I were friends once, before titles and appearances became everything to her. She says the merchant's daughter has bewitched you, that she's using you to rise above her station. Alexander's laugh held no humour. And what station would that be, James? That of a brilliant researcher whose work could save countless lives? Of a woman who sees beyond scars to the soul beneath? There will be talk. There is already talk. Alexander stood, his military bearing evident. But I won't fight you, James. not over your sister's wounded pride. You refuse the challenge? James's hand went to his sword hilt. I refuse to perpetuate this foolishness. Alexander moved to the window. Would you truly have me meet you in Hyde Park, risk death or injury, all because your sister can't accept that I found love after she rejected me? The word love hung in the air between them. James's grip on his sword loosened slightly. The Tun will say you're a coward. The Tun said I was ruined when I returned from war with a scarred face. Alexander turned back to face him. They said, Isabella was ugly before they ever knew her name. Tell me, James, why should their opinions matter now? Before James could respond, the door opened to admit Isabella herself, followed by Charlotte and the Dowager Countess. They matter, Isabella said firmly, because words have power, but so does truth. She held up a packet of letters. Lady Victoria has been writing to my father's business associates, attempting to destroy his reputation along with mine. James paled. She wouldn't. She did. The Dowager's voice cracked like a whip. Just as she wrote to every military widow in London, warning them against supporting the publication of Miss Blackwood's medical research. Research that could have saved their husbands. Charlotte stepped forward. Your sister fears change, Lord. James, she fears a world where worth isn't measured by physical beauty or social rank. And so she sends you to fight her battle, Isabella added softly. But the real battle isn't fought with swords at dawn. It's fought with ideas, with progress, with the courage to see beyond society's narrow views. James looked between them, his young face troubled. I didn't know about the letters. No, Alexander said kindly, you didn't. Just as you don't know that your sister broke our engagement not because of my scar, but because the war left me less interested in social climbing than in making a real difference in the world. The Dowager Countess moved to stand before James. You have a choice, young man. Continue being your sister's pawn, or open your eyes to the change that's coming. The Tun will talk either way, Charlotte added. The question is, what do you want them to say about you? James was silent for a long moment. Finally, he withdrew a second letter from his coat. Victoria gave me this, to be delivered to Miss Blackwood's father after the duel. Isabella took the letter, her hands steady. More poison, probably. James straightened his shoulders. I apologize, Lord Rothschild. The challenge is withdrawn. He turned to Isabella. And to you, Miss Blackwood, I've been less than honorable. After he left, Alexander gathered Isabella close. Are you all right? I'm furious, she admitted. Not at James, he's young, easily led. But Victoria will find herself quite isolated soon, the Dowager said with satisfaction. I've arranged for copies of her letters to be circulated among certain influential ladies. Even her closest allies won't forgive her attacking war widows. Charlotte touched Isabella's arm. Meanwhile, the Royal Society has expressed interest in your research, and 3 more families have accepted their invitations to your presentation. Isabella leaned into Alexander's embrace. So we win by refusing to fight? No, he murmured. Into her hair, we win by fighting for what truly matters. In the Blackwood family drawing room, an old portrait caught the late afternoon light. Isabella stood before it, studying her mother's features. The same prominent nose, the same sharp chin that society had deemed so unfortunate. She was beautiful, Alexander said quietly, joining her. I see where you get your strength. Isabella touched the canvas gently. Father had this painted just before she fell ill. I was too young to remember her clearly, but he always said she loved knowledge as much as beauty. Miss Isabella. Mary appeared in the doorway. Letters arrived from Lady Victoria's mother, the Countess of Ashworth. The letter was heavy, sealed with the Ashworth crest. Isabella broke the seal with trembling fingers, Alexander's steady presence behind her as she read. Dear Miss Blackwood, I write to offer my deepest apologies for my daughter's conduct. The truth of her actions has come to light, and I am both Horrified and ashamed, Victoria has been sent to our country estate to reflect on her behavior. More importantly, I wish to share something with you. 20 years ago, I was close friends with your mother, Elizabeth. She was, as you may not know, a brilliant botanist in her own right. Her work on medicinal herbs was groundbreaking, though society prevented her from publishing under her own name. Among my papers, I have found her original research journals. I believe they rightfully belong to you. Isabella looked up at Alexander, her eyes bright with tears. Did you know? Not until grandmother mentioned it last week. She's been investigating your mother's past ever since she read your research. William Blackwood entered carrying a wooden box. This arrived with the letter. His voice was gruff with emotion. I should have shared this with you sooner, my dear. Inside the box lay several leather-bound journals, their pages filled with precise drawings and detailed notes in a hand, similar to Isabella's own. Pressed flowers and leaves, carefully preserved, marked various pages. She was working with Alexander's mother. Isabella breathed, piecing it together. Their research overlapped. More than overlapped, the Dowager Countess announced from the doorway, Charlotte at her side. They were collaborators. Your mother's work on native English herbs complemented my daughter-in-law's studies of continental specimens. William Blackwood sank into a chair. Elizabeth always said her letters to a noble friend were about botany. I thought she was being modest, hiding her social connections. She was protecting their work, Charlotte said gently. In those days, two women conducting serious research would have been dismissed entirely. Isabella traced her mother's signature on the final page. All this time, I thought I was alone in my interests, that I was strange, unfeminine for caring more about science than society. You come from a line of remarkable women, Alexander said, his hand warm on her shoulder, as does our research. Our research? He smiled. Well, I can hardly take credit for organizing all those battlefield notes without acknowledging my mother's influence. And now, with your mother's work added to the collection, we have 3 generations of research, Isabella finished. 3 women who saw beyond society's limitations. The Dowager Countess tapped her cane decisively, which is why the Royal Society's presentation must go forward, regardless of any remaining opposition. This is no longer just about challenging society's views on beauty. It's about truth, Charlotte added, about acknowledging the contributions of those who were forced to work in shadows. William Blackwood cleared his throat. Your mother would. Be proud, Isabella, not just of your work, but of your courage in claiming it publicly. As would mine, Alexander said softly. Then, to everyone's surprise, he knelt beside Isabella's chair. Which is why I can't wait any longer to ask, Will, you make me the happiest of men. Will you join your strength and brilliance to mine, as our mothers did before us? Isabella's eyes moved from her mother's portrait to the journals to Alexander's earnest face. In each, she saw a reflection of truth finally emerging into light. Yes, she whispered, then louder with all the confidence of a woman claiming her heritage. Yes. The Dowager's satisfied smile suggested she'd known this moment was coming. Charlotte wiped happy tears from her eyes, while William Blackwood attempted to maintain his stern expression and failed utterly. And in the fading afternoon light, the portrait of Elizabeth Blackwood seemed to smile down at her daughter, who had inherited not just her features, but her passion for discovery and her courage to challenge the world's narrow definitions of beauty. The morning of Isabella's presentation to the Royal Society dawned grey and threatening. She stood before her mirror, fingers tracing the torn invitation that had arrived the previous evening, her own name scratched out, replaced with a single word, pretender. It changes nothing, Charlotte said firmly, arranging Isabella's hair with sisterly care. The Society's directors have confirmed their attendance. Even Oxford is sending representatives. Victoria may be in the country, but she still has allies. Isabella smoothed her severe dark blue dress, chosen for its scholarly appearance rather than fashion. What if they're right? What if I'm reaching too high? Then you'll have plenty of company. Alexander stood in the doorway, resplendent in formal attire. The Wright brothers reached for the sky. Galileo reached for the stars. And you, my love, reach for truth. The Royal Society's great hall was packed when they arrived. Isabella clutched her mother's journal along with her own research notes, drawing strength from the legacy they represented. The Dowager Countess had arranged everything perfectly. The display of pressed herbs, the detailed illustrations, even the testimonials from military doctors who had used similar treatments during the war. But as Isabella moved toward the podium, a familiar voice rang out. "This is an outrage!" Lord Pembroke, Victoria's uncle, stood from his seat in the front row. "The Royal Society is no place for a merchant's daughter playing at science. And these so-called discoveries, stolen from true scholars, no doubt." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Isabella felt her carefully constructed confidence beginning to crack. Then another voice, clear and strong. "I beg to differ, Lord Pembroke." The Countess of Ashworth rose, her elegant figure commanding attention. "These discoveries were made by my dear friend Elizabeth Blackwood 20 years ago. Society's prejudice forced her to hide her work. Would you have us perpetuate that injustice? This is about more than one woman's research," the Dowager Countess added, her voice carrying to every corner. "This is about acknowledging truth, regardless of its source," Lord Pembroke sneered. "And I suppose her engagement to your grandson has nothing to do with your support?" "My engagement," Isabella's voice surprised even herself with its steadiness, "is irrelevant to the validity of this research. The herbs either work or they don't. The treatments either save lives or they don't. Science cares nothing for titles or appearances." She opened her mother's journal, then her own. 20 years of research. 3 generations of women working to ease suffering and save lives. Judge the work on its merits, my lords and ladies. That's all I ask. Alexander stepped forward. "As a soldier who saw these treatments work on the battlefield, I can testify to their effectiveness. Would you dismiss the saving of lives because you disapprove of the Saviour's face or family?" The hall erupted in heated discussion, but then, from the back, a new voice. "Let her speak." The crowd parted to reveal a distinguished gentleman leaning heavily on a cane. "I'm Dr. James Morrison, Chief Surgeon at St. Bartholomew's Hospital. During the war, I used treatments remarkably similar to those described in Miss Blackwood's research. They saved countless lives, including my own leg." He limped forward. "I care not who made these discoveries, woman or man, noble or common. I care only that they work. Please, Miss Blackwood, continue your presentation." Isabella took a deep breath, looking out over the assembled crowd. She saw Charlotte's encouraging smile, the Dowager's proud nod, her father's tears barely contained, and Alexander, whose eyes held the same mixture of love and respect she'd first seen in the library. "Thank you, Dr. Morrison." She straightened her shoulders. "Ladies and gentlemen of the Royal Society, I present to you the combined research of 3 women who dared to see beyond society's limitations." Lord Pembroke and his supporters stormed out, but Isabella barely noticed. She had found her voice, and with it her place in the world, not as a beauty or a noble's wife, but as herself, a woman of science, a seeker of truth, a challenger of limitations. The breaking point had come, and she had emerged stronger for it. In the wake of the Royal Society presentation, London's suffocating social atmosphere became unbearable. Every salon buzzed with whispers, every drawing room held barely concealed tension. The battle lines had been drawn. Those who supported progress, and those who clung desperately to the old ways. "You need air," Charlotte declared one morning, brandishing a stack of travel documents. "Both of you do." Grandmother agrees. Isabella looked up from her correspondence. Letters had been pouring in from doctors and hospitals across England. "What do you mean?" "The Rothschild country estate in Derbyshire," Alexander explained, taking the papers from his sister. "It's where our mother did much of her research. The gardens are still maintained exactly as she left them." "Running away?" Isabella's father asked from his corner of the study, though his tone held more concern than criticism. "Strategic retreat," the Dowager Countess corrected, sweeping into the room. "Let London society chew on recent events while you both catch your breath. Besides," her eyes twinkled, "the estate's library holds more of my daughter-in-law's research materials." And so, one misty morning found Isabella and Alexander's carriage rolling through Derbyshire's green hills, Charlotte acting as chaperone. The Rothschild estate emerged from the fog like something from a fairy tale, all Gothic spires and sprawling gardens. "The greenhouses are through there," Alexander pointed out as they approached. "Mother's primary workshop is still intact. And beyond that, the herb gardens." Isabella pressed her face to the window, drinking in the sight of carefully tended beds laid out in geometric patterns. "And they're magnificent." Mrs. Reynolds, the housekeeper, greeted them warmly. "Such a joy to have the family back, and you must be Miss Blackwood. We've heard so much about your work. The gardeners are quite excited. They've maintained Lady Rothschild's experimental plots all these years, hoping someone would continue her research." The following days took on a dreamlike quality. Mornings in the greenhouse, cataloguing specimens and comparing notes with the combined journals of their mothers. Afternoons walking the grounds, Alexander showing Isabella every hidden corner of his childhood home. Evenings in the library, where Charlotte would often find them surrounded by books and papers, deep in discussion about some scientific principle or medical application. "You know," Charlotte observed one evening, "I don't think I've ever seen two people fall in love over botanical classifications before." Isabella looked up from a particularly fascinating treatise on wound-healing herbs. "Is that what we're doing?" "Among other things." Alexander's hand found hers across the desk. "Though I must admit, watching you catalogue plant specimens is surprisingly romantic." "It's the passion," Charlotte teased. "Scientists in love are terribly poetic about the most technical things, but their idyll couldn't last forever." A letter arrived from the Dowager Countess, carried by special messenger. "My dears, London society has had sufficient time to digest recent events. The Royal Society's formal recognition of Isabella's research has silenced many critics. Those who still oppose progress find themselves increasingly isolated. More importantly, 3 major hospitals have expressed interest in implementing the treatments. It seems saving lives outweighs social prejudice after all. Time to return and face the music, which I suspect you'll find has changed its tune considerably. With love, Grandmother P.S. Lady Victoria has announced her engagement to an elderly Duke. I believe she's finally found someone who appreciates her traditional values." Isabella read the letter twice before looking at Alexander. "She's right. We can't hide forever." "We weren't hiding," he corrected gently. "We were gathering strength, building foundations." His hand caressed her cheek, making sure we could weather any storm together. Charlotte cleared her throat from the doorway. "If you two are quite finished being romantic, Mrs. Reynolds wants to know if you'd like to see the newly catalogued specimens in the East greenhouse." Isabella gathered her skirts, eyes bright with enthusiasm. "The night-blooming specimens?" "The very same." Charlotte laughed. "Though how you can be equally excited about flowers and medical research." "Because they're connected," Isabella replied, taking Alexander's offered arm. "Everything is connected. Beauty, science, love, truth. They're all part of the same grand design." As they walked through the gardens, Isabella realized something profound. This wasn't an escape at all. It was a homecoming. Here, among the herbs and flowers that had inspired 2 generations before her, she had found not just acceptance, but belonging. The London ton awaited them, but its power to wound had diminished. After all, How could society's shallow judgments compare to the deep truths they'd discovered? About science, about themselves, about love that saw beyond surfaces to the very heart of things. London had changed in their absence, or perhaps they had changed London. As their carriage rolled through familiar streets, Isabella noticed how differently people reacted to their passage. Where once there had been turned heads and hidden sneers, now there were respectful nods and genuine smiles. "The latest society paper," Charlotte announced, reading from a freshly printed sheet. Lord Rothschild and his brilliant fiancée, Miss Blackwood, returned to London following groundbreaking medical research. Several prominent physicians have already implemented their revolutionary treatments with remarkable success. "They don't mention my face," Isabella observed with mild surprise, "or my scar." Alexander squeezed her hand. "Perhaps London is learning to see with clearer eyes." The Dowager Countess's townhouse was their first stop. They found her holding court in her drawing room, surrounded by an unlikely mixture of society ladies and medical professionals. "Ah, there you are." The Dowager rose to embrace them. "Dr. Morrison was just telling us about the successful implementation of your treatments at St. Bartholomew's." The distinguished surgeon they'd met at the Royal Society presentation bowed over Isabella's hand. "Miss Blackwood, your methods have already saved dozens of lives. We've had remarkable success with infection prevention in particular. The military hospitals are interested as well," added a colonel in full dress uniform. "Your combination of traditional herbs with modern medical understanding could revolutionize battlefield medicine." Alexander's arm tightened protectively around Isabella's waist. "Perhaps we could continue this discussion tomorrow? We've had a long journey." Of course. The Dowager shooed her guests away with practiced grace. Once they were alone, she fixed the couple with a penetrating stare. "Well, was the countryside everything I promised?" "It was perfect," Isabella admitted. "But I'm glad to be back. There's so much work to be done." "Indeed," the Dowager's eyes twinkled, "including a wedding to plan, unless you'd prefer to continue living in sin among the herb gardens." "Grandmother!" Charlotte exclaimed, but Alexander laughed. "We've set a date," he announced. 2 months from now. Small ceremony, intimate reception." The Dowager snorted. "Small? Intimate? My dear boy, do you have any idea how many people are desperate to witness this union? Every hospital board member, every progressive thinker, every champion of merit over birth, they all want to be part of this moment." "It's not just about us anymore, is it?" Isabella asked quietly. "It never was." The Dowager softened. "You've become symbols, both of you. The scarred war hero who chose brilliance over beauty, the merchant's daughter who revolutionized medicine. Your marriage represents everything the old guard fears and the new guard celebrates." "Speaking of the old guard," Charlotte interjected, "you'll never guess who I saw yesterday. Lady Victoria shopping for her trousseau. She looked positively ancient next to her elderly duke." "Charlotte," Alexander chided, but without heat. "The Duke is actually quite respected in medical circles," the Dowager mused. "Old-fashioned in manner, perhaps, but not in mind. He's one of the hospital board members most enthusiastic about implementing Isabella's treatments." A knock at the door heralded the arrival of William Blackwood. "I thought I might find you here." He embraced his daughter. "The workshop is overflowing with letters from doctors and hospitals. Even universities are requesting your research materials." "We'll need a proper office," Alexander said. "Somewhere to coordinate the distribution of information and materials." Isabella's eyes lit up. "The old conservatory at your townhouse. With some renovations, it could be perfect. Plenty of space for specimens and documentation." "Already thinking like a Rothschild," the Dowager approved. "Making plans, changing the world." "But first," Charlotte declared, "we have appearances to make. Lady Morton is hosting a musical evening tomorrow. Everyone who matters will be there." Isabella tensed slightly, but Alexander's hand found hers. "Ready to face society again, my love?" She thought of their time in Derbyshire, of the strength they'd gathered, of the lives already saved by their work. "Yes," she said firmly. "After all, we have something better than society's approval now." "Oh, and what's that?" "Truth," Isabella replied. "Beauty, science, love, all the things that truly matter." The Dowager Countess raised her teacup in a toast. "To things that matter, and to those brave enough to fight for them." Looking around the room at her soon-to-be family, Isabella felt a profound sense of rightness. They had returned to London not as fugitives or outcasts, but as pioneers. The whispers and stares might never fully cease, but they had lost their power to wound. After all, how could society's judgment compare to the joy of lives saved, knowledge shared, and love that saw beyond all surfaces to the very heart of truth? Lady Morton's ballroom blazed with hundreds of candles, their light reflecting off gilt mirrors and crystal chandeliers. But the greatest transformation wasn't in the decor. It was in the way Isabella Blackwood's name appeared at the top of the guest list, marked as the evening's guest of honor. "Times do change," Charlotte murmured, adjusting Isabella's midnight blue gown, "though I doubt anyone expected them to change quite this dramatically." Isabella touched the delicate silver necklace at her throat, a gift from Alexander. Each charm representing a different medicinal herb. They had little choice. Science doesn't bow to social prejudice. Neither do you, my dear. The Dowager Countess appeared, resplendent in purple silk. "And here comes your gallant defender now." Alexander crossed the room with military precision, his scarred face holding no hint of self-consciousness. "Ladies," he bowed, "Isabella, you look radiant, as do you." She took his offered arm, noting how his formal attire bore medals not just from his military service, but also new honors from medical societies. Their entrance into the ballroom caused a momentary hush, followed by enthusiastic applause. Lady Morton herself came forward to greet them. "Miss Blackwood, Lord Rothschild, you must tell us about your latest breakthrough. Dr. Morrison was just saying the infection rate at St. Bartholomew's has dropped dramatically since implementing your methods." Before Isabella could respond, another familiar voice joined the conversation. "The military hospitals report similar success." Lady Victoria appeared, on the arm of her elderly duke. Her perfect features showed signs of strain, but her voice was cordial. "My husband's colleagues speak highly of your work." Alexander's grip on Isabella's arm tightened slightly, but his voice remained pleasant. "Lady Victoria, your grace, we're honored by your interest in the research." The Duke of Westbrook nodded approvingly. Fine work indeed. Revolution in medical science, what? Never mind all that nonsense about proper spheres and social order. Results speak for themselves." Victoria's smile looked slightly pained. "Indeed they do, dearest." As the orchestra struck up a waltz, Alexander turned to Isabella. "Shall we show them how a scientist dances?" They moved across the floor with practiced grace, their steps in perfect harmony. Around them, other couples danced, but the whispers now held admiration rather than mockery. "Look how they move together. Did you hear about the new hospital? Wing their funding. They say she's catalogued over 100 new medicinal combinations. His scar gives him such a distinguished air." "They're still talking about us," Isabella observed, amusement replacing old anxiety. "Let them." Alexander guided her through a turn. "Though I prefer when they discuss our work rather than our faces." "Speaking of work," Isabella's eyes sparkled. "With excitement, I've had an idea about expanding the research. If we combine your mother's continental specimens with the new varieties we discovered in Derbyshire." Alexander laughed softly. "Only you could make botanical research sound romantic," says the man who proposed over a treatise on wound-healing herbs. Their playful banter was interrupted by Dr. Morrison approaching with several colleagues in tow. "Miss Blackwood, Lord Rothschild, might we have a moment? The Royal College of Surgeons is most interested in establishing a permanent research position." The evening whirled by in a blur of discussions, dances, and diplomatic negotiations. Isabella found herself moving easily between social and scientific discourse, no longer feeling like an outsider in either world. During a quiet moment, she and Alexander stepped out onto the balcony for air. The London night spread before them, a tapestry of lights and shadows. "Happy?" he asked, drawing her close. "More than," she leaned into him, "though I still can't quite believe how much has changed. A year ago I was hiding in corners at balls like this. And now you're revolutionizing medical science, inspiring young researchers, and dancing with a scarred nobleman who's madly in love with you. Madly in love with my mind, you mean? With all of you." He turned her to face him. "Your mind, your heart, your face. Everything that makes you uniquely, perfectly Isabella." From inside, they heard Charlotte calling their names. "More admirers awaiting an audience, no doubt," Alexander sighed. Isabella straightened her shoulders, ready to return to their triumph. "Shall we give them something to truly talk about?" "Lead the way, my love." "You always do." They returned to the ballroom hand in hand, their so-called imperfections forgotten in the light of all they had achieved together. The ton could whisper all they liked. Isabella and Alexander had found something far more precious than social approval. They had found truth, purpose, and a love that saw straight to the soul. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the windows of Isabella's childhood home. She stood before her mirror, not to criticize her features as she once had, but to pin a sprig of healing herbs to her bridal bouquet, a testament to the journey that had brought her here. "Something old," Charlotte said, fastening their mother's pearl necklace around Isabella's throat, though in this case also something revolutionary. The pearls were strung with tiny glass vials containing dried herbs, a wedding gift Alexander's mother had designed but never lived to create. The dowager countess had found the plans among her papers and commissioned them specially. "Your mother would have loved this," William Blackwood said from the doorway, his eyes misty. "Both your mothers would have." Isabella touched the pearls. "Gently. They're here with us, in every discovery, every life saved." The wedding license lay on her desk, next to the latest medical journal featuring their research. The duality seemed perfect somehow. Love and science, heart and mind, beauty and truth, all intertwined. "Lord Rothschild has arrived," Mary announced, her face glowing with pride for her former charge. "And you'll never believe who else is here." Following Mary downstairs, Isabella found Dr. Morrison waiting in the drawing room, leaning on his cane. "Miss Blackwood, I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but I brought something that belongs to you." He held out a leather folder. Inside was a formal certificate from the Royal Society, officially recognizing not just Isabella's research, but also the posthumous contributions of both Elizabeth Blackwood and Lady Rothschild. "We've created a new research fellowship in their names," Dr. Morrison explained, "for women in medical science. The first recipient will be announced next month." Isabella's vision blurred with tears. "Thank you. This means more than I can say." "No." "My dear," he patted her hand, "thank you. Now, shall we proceed to the church? I believe there's a rather anxious gentleman waiting there." St. George's Church was filled to capacity, not with merely the ton, but with doctors, researchers, patients who had benefited from their treatments, and even some of the war veterans Alexander had served with. Their worlds had merged completely, creating something entirely new. Alexander waited at the altar, his scarred face radiating joy. Behind him stood James Ashworth, who had become an unexpected ally after breaking free from his sister's influence. Victoria herself sat quietly in a back pew with her elderly duke, her expression unreadable but no longer hostile. As Isabella walked down the aisle on her father's arm, she heard none of the whispers that had once haunted her. Instead, there was only pride, respect, and genuine celebration. The ceremony itself was both traditional and revolutionary, just like them. They exchanged the usual vows, but added their own promises to seek truth together, to challenge conventions that needed challenging, to see beauty in all its forms. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the priest declared, and as Alexander kissed her, Isabella felt the last walls between their worlds crumbling away. The wedding breakfast that followed was held in the Rothschild townhouse's newly renovated conservatory, now a combination research center and social space. Herbs and flowers bloomed alongside medical texts and research papers, while society ladies mingled with physicians, discussing the latest medical advances as naturally as they might discuss the weather. "Look what you've done," the Dowager Countess said proudly, gesturing to the diverse gathering. "You've transformed more than medicine. You've transformed society itself." Charlotte raised her glass. "To the bride and groom, may they continue to show us that true beauty lies in the courage to be oneself." "To truth and progress," added Dr. Morrison. "To love that sees clearly," Alexander murmured, drawing Isabella close. As celebration swirled around them, Isabella looked at her husband, her partner in science, love, and life, and saw not his scar but his soul, just as he saw not her supposedly imperfect features, but her brilliant mind and loving heart. They had transformed not just themselves or society, but the very definition of beauty. And this was only the beginning. The deed to their new home arrived on a spring morning, just as the herb gardens were beginning to bloom. The property straddled the line between London society and practical necessity, a grand townhouse with extensive grounds, perfectly situated. To serve as both research facility and social venue, the conservatory will need expansion, Alexander noted, studying the architectural plans. "We'll want proper laboratory space alongside the growing areas." Isabella looked up from her correspondence. Letters from hospitals across Europe requesting their treatments, and a larger library. The medical students will need somewhere to study. They had begun accepting apprentices, young men and women eager to learn their methods. More revolutionary still, they made no distinction between noble and common-born. Merit alone determined who could study with them. Lady Rothschild, their head gardener, appeared at the door. "The first shipment of specimens has arrived from India, and Dr. Morrison is here with the new research fellow." Isabella still felt a thrill at her new title, not for its social status, but for what it represented, the union of love and purpose, of heart and mind. "Send them in, please." The research fellow proved to be a serious young woman named Margaret Howard, daughter of a country doctor. Her hands bore the calluses of practical work, her eyes the spark of keen intelligence. Miss Howard's thesis on combining traditional remedies with modern medical understanding is remarkably aligned with our approach, Dr. Morrison explained. Though some at the Royal Society questioned whether a doctor's daughter could handle such responsibility, just as they questioned whether a merchant's daughter could revolutionize medicine. Isabella smiled warmly at Margaret. "Welcome to our team, Miss Howard. Shall we show you the laboratories?" As they toured the facility, Isabella watched Margaret's eyes grow wide at the extensive collection of specimens and research materials. Here was the future they had fought for, a world where ability mattered more than ancestry. "Lady Rothschild," Margaret hesitated. "Some say your success is merely due to your marriage into nobility, while others claim my marriage was despite my common birth," Isabella finished. "The truth is, Miss Howard, my husband and I succeeded because we dared to look beyond society's shallow judgments. We saw truth in science and in each other." "And speaking of truth," Alexander's voice came from behind them, "the military hospital committee has approved our new treatment protocols. Full implementation begins next month." Isabella introduced Margaret, watching with satisfaction as her husband showed no surprise at their new fellow's common background. They discussed recent research developments, the conversation flowing naturally between social equals united by intellectual passion. Later that evening, as they prepared for yet another social engagement, Isabella caught Alexander studying their reflection in the mirror. "What do you see?" she asked softly. "Us." He drew her close. "Not our faces or our titles, just us. Everything we've built together, everything we're still becoming." The Dowager Countess's carriage arrived to collect them. She still insisted on making grand entrances together at major events. As they travelled through London's evening streets, Isabella reflected on how much had changed in so short a time. The ton still whispered, of course, but now they whispered about research breakthroughs and lives saved, about barriers broken and horizons expanded. Even Victoria, at their last meeting, had spoken with genuine interest about implementing their treatments in hospitals funded by her elderly duke. Their new home rose before them, its windows glowing with welcome. More than a residence, it was a symbol of transformation, a place where science and society, common and noble, past and future, all merged into something new and vital. Ready to change the world again tomorrow? Alexander helped her down from the carriage. Isabella looked at their home, at the laboratories where new discoveries waited, at the gardens where healing plants bloomed, at the library where future generations would study. "Always," she replied. "After all, we're only just beginning." And in the gathering dusk, two figures who had once been judged for their faces walked hand in hand into a future they had helped create. One where true beauty was finally recognized for what it was, a light that shone from within, illuminating all it touched. 1 year later, Isabella sat at her mother's old desk, now placed in pride of place in her study, penning a letter to her future self. "My dearest future self. As I write this, the morning sun streams through windows that overlook gardens where healing herbs grow alongside roses. Our home has become exactly what we dreamed, a place where science and beauty flourish together. This past year has brought more change than I could have imagined. The Royal Society's fellowship program has expanded to include 5 more women researchers. Our treatment methods have been adopted by hospitals across 3 countries. Even the London ton has evolved, though perhaps that's the greatest miracle of all. Yesterday, I overheard someone describe me as the brilliant Lady Rothschild, without a single mention of my face. Alexander's scar is now spoken of with respect, a badge of honor from his service, rather than a mark of shame. We've proven that true beauty radiates from within, through actions that touch and transform the world around us. Victoria visited last week with her duke. She's changed too, in her own way. She's funding a hospital wing dedicated to treating poor children, and her eyes hold a new kind of light when she speaks of making a real difference in the world. Charlotte is courting a young doctor who sees her for her wit and warmth. The Dowager Countess continues to champion our causes with her indomitable spirit. Father has found new purpose, helping us manage the business aspects of our expanding research program. But perhaps the most precious change of all arrived just this morning. Confirmation that in 7 months' time, Alexander and I will welcome our own little scientist into the world. A child who will grow up knowing that true worth lies not in faces or titles, but in the courage to be oneself and the determination to make the world better. To you, my future self, I leave this reminder. We were once mocked for our face, until love showed us our true beauty. Now we help others see their own beauty through the work we do and the lives we touch. Never forget that transformation is possible, that love sees clearly when society is blind, that science and beauty, heart and mind, can create something greater than themselves, with hope for all the discoveries yet to come. Isabella Rothschild. As she sealed the letter, Alexander appeared in the doorway, his face alight with joy. The new shipment of specimens from the Americas has arrived, and you'll never guess who delivered them. James Ashworth. He's requesting an apprenticeship in botanical medicine. Isabella smiled, touching her hand to her still flat stomach. The world really has changed, hasn't it? Thanks to you. He crossed the room to kiss her. Ready to see what other wonders await, she stood, taking his arm. Through the window, she could see their gardens where healing plants bloomed, their laboratories where new discoveries were made daily, their lecture halls where future generations learned to see beyond surface appearances to the truth beneath. "Always ready," she replied. "After all, this is just the beginning of our story." And so they walked together into their continuing adventure. Two souls who had discovered that true beauty lies not in faces or titles, but in the courage to be oneself and the power to help others see their own worth. Their love story had transformed, not just themselves, but the very world around them, proving that when heart and mind work together, anything is possible. The end.